Welcome to the Decarb Connect podcast. We have been on hiatus, as many of you know, and I'm really pleased that our first episode back in this refresh series is with Gonzalo Galindo, who is president of Cemex Ventures. Gonzalo, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in a moment, but let me just give a bit of context for this conversation to the listeners. So not long ago, we had an event in Houston and Gonzalo joined us there to talk about the role of renewables, but also to some extent the challenges for renewables as one of the options for decarbonising industry. And that's why we're here today. I thought it'd be interesting to do a follow-up on that conversation and really to pick your brains, Gonzalo, about how the cement sector, how hard-to-abate sectors view renewables, which are often touted, aren't they, as the kind of, this is the key way to decarbonise. So we'll be talking about that. And just one other thing I'll add is anyone who doesn't know Cemex Ventures, it's well worth taking a look at the portfolio that is outlined on their website, because obviously the remit of the venture group is not only to look at climate tech, but it does involve investments in, I spotted a couple today, for example, one is on solar that we'll be talking about, one in energy storage, one in gravel from recycled plastic. So there's a range of technologies and companies that Cemex Ventures are engaging with around this kind of broad area of decarbonisation and climate. But Gonzalo, before we get into that, let's start with you personally. And can you just set the scene, give people a bit of a sense of who you are and how have you arrived at this point in time where you're focusing on investment and climate as well?
Thank you. Well, I'm Gonzalo Galindo, as you mentioned. I'm actually a veteran in Cemex. I've been with the company close to 24 years, doing all sorts of things. I've started in business development, buying companies for Cemex in Egypt, in Asia, in Europe. Actually, most majority of our operations in Europe were bought in a transaction in which I co-led, buying a company in the UK, which had operations in Europe called RMC, the old RMC. I also spent some time doing operations. I was head of our operations in the UK, in certain part in the east part of the US, and I've been always vocal about the strategy and about how technology will shape industries and businesses looking forward. No, and at some point, about 5 years and a half ago, I was requested by our CEO to take a leap into that discussion and create Cemex Ventures. No, and Cemex Ventures, since the beginning, we tried to create an entity which had a lot of strategic content, and we saw with Cemex Ventures as the vehicle to actually bring in innovation to the company, which actually helped us achieve our strategic objectives. And that's what we did since the beginning. The building materials industry in itself is a very tangential industry to the construction world. So we felt really more vulnerable because in a construction project, there are several decisions being taken that we are not participating. And on top of that, we are providing essential materials which will have to qualify with a lot of new characteristics moving forward into the future. So it was for us very, very strategic to actually have somebody through Cemex Ventures really looking into the whole construction value chain and really trying to help Cemex attract innovation, which actually help us become a much more modern, much more strategic company looking into the future. No? As such, climate action, climate change is one of the key priorities for us because cement production is a very CO2 emitting process. And it's something we need to abate in the next 20 years. And that's why we ended up thinking a lot about climate action, CO2, decarbonization, hydrogen, renewables, and all those type of things. No?
Okay, so that's a good kind of scene setter, I think. And as you said, the Ventures Group has a broader lens than just climate, but even so, within its climate view, tell us a little bit about how, is there a sense within the group that you want to have a certain amount of investments in that space, or is it more, I don't know, certain types of technologies that you're going after?
Our role is actually, as mentioned, bringing technological advancements and innovations to actually help us achieve certain strategic objectives. As such, sustainability and climate action is one, but we also invest a lot in the future of building materials, the future of construction processes, digitalization, supply chain, and things like that. No? So we try to be fairly well connected with the strategic discussion at Cemex and try to set priorities into what is really urgent. No? Climate action has become a very top priority for us, almost at par with health and safety, which has been our top priority since I joined this company. No? Because we know that being an industry which is considered hard to abate, which I hate that concept of hard to abate. Actually, we are the industry with the best opportunity to abate because we can become an engine of CO2 usage and circular economy for the future. But it will take some time for certain characteristics of the industry to actually get into that point. No? So we decided to actually start very early in the process to get involved with those type of technologies. No? So suddenly the climate action discussion became a almost day-to-day discussion for the Cemex Ventures group. The profile of the investments we have done in the last 2-3 years have completely shifted into climate action, which, by the way, is a completely different ballgame in terms of investing when compared to digital solutions or things like that. We're talking about completely different orders of magnitude, completely different type of analysis, due diligence, collaborations with the startups, and so on. It's a completely different ballgame.
Is it? Well, I'm just going to kind of jump on that a little because that's an interesting comment, really, for a corporate venture capitalist to make, is that how different those investments are. So when you're looking at it, does it have different analysis because of the nature of the technology itself, or is it more about the nature of the challenge as Cemex sees it?
I think it's a combination of both. Plus the landscape of the nature of the type of money which is flowing into this vertical. You have in this vertical very big funds, the millionaires trying to do the good thing and pledging billions of dollars into climate action. You have the Bill Gates, you have the Jeff Bezos, then you have the oil companies, the oil and gas, which they have money and they can invest in these type of things. No? And then you have the steel and the cement guys, which are kind of smaller, but with issues of emissions. No? On top of that, the technologies are different. It's not just 3 computer geeks programming software. No, this is PhDs with concepts which probably in the lab have worked, but then they need to escalate industrially. Each industrial pilot, it will cost you $8-10 million, which is not just to put the beta system and let's see if it works. No, this you really need to install steel and pipes and connect with industrial assets. No, so it's a completely different ballgame. No, so in this type of investments, the relationship and the collaboration between the startups and industrial groups like ours, it's wider. It's really much more intense, much more day to day, and really because we're trying to help these technologies to actually become big and become available. No?
And when you're looking at those sort of engineering-led startups and technologies, is the fact that Cemex has these various sites around the world, is that always a part of the investment plan, or is it just investment?
It has to do with it. It's not just that we go as the Ventures group and I like this one. I mean, we are not experts in all type of technologies. We have to draw from a lot of the expertise from a lot of our colleagues around Cemex, the R&D people, the technical guys, the engineers, the plants, and really coordinate the assessment and analysis of those technologies is very, very thorough, and a lot of people participate, and we try to compare one with other and so on in order to take decisions that we know it will be supported by all. Because at the end of the day, whenever we invest in this type of technologies, it's not just investment. We usually try to do some sort of collaboration agreement for piloting these type of things, to help them develop this type of things. And for that, you really need the participation of the people at the plant level or the R&D guys in our R&D facilities, or a couple of engineers helping us to think how we're going to connect this technology to that machine and things like that. So it's a very open. I think it's open innovations in its essence. No, I mean really opening us to them and them to us to actually try to make things happen. No?
And then last question on this kind of aspect before we start talking more about renewables. I'm interested in what sort of stage do you typically like to engage with an emerging company? In
this type of investments in climate actions, we try to get involved at early stage for two reasons. These companies, if they work, they get valued very fast, very quickly. And then the type of checks we can write, they might not make sense for them. So we really need to step in early to actually offer them an outlet for them to develop these technologies for the cement industry, because they have similar agreements with the oil and gas guys, with the steel guys and things like that. So we really need to become sufficiently interesting for them to actually say, the cement industry is important for us as well, and Cemex is the type of guys which cannot help us. No? So we need to enter fairly early. Of course, we try to do follow-ons, but at some point, I mean, we haven't reached that point in our investment, but at some point we might decide whether we continue investing or not, no? Depending on how things go. But it's not just the money that we give them and the opportunity. We try to actually be their partners, no? And in some cases, we end up doing joint ventures for commercialization of certain things or for development of certain technologies and things like that. No, it's not just the financial investment. No?
Not just about cash, it's about all the assets at your disposal.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's kind of now come back into this area of focus on renewables that you and I had agreed we'd kind of focus on for this podcast. For those listening, and there'll be a variety of people, some from industry, some not, some from an experienced investor background, some not. Let's just start with what is the issue of renewables for a sector like cement? Why isn't it just a straightforward fuel switch?
The problem with the industry, with our industry, is that our emissions are not necessarily related to combustion. We do have a fair amount of what we call process emissions. The actual chemical reaction of producing clinker, which is the mid product of producing cement, actually generates a substantial amount of CO2. In fact, in one cement plant, about 65 to 70% of those emissions come from the chemical reaction. For the whole value chain, all the way to the actual the quarry, all the way to our customers, that number goes down to about 60%, give or take. No, if you take emissions on transportation, on production of concrete, on quarrying, and so on. No? So renewables will effectively help us to actually solve that other 40%. The 60%, there's plenty of things we can do, but it's not about renewables. It's about chemistry. It's about changing the raw materials, maximizing the amount of clinker that we can use in a ton of, minimizing the amount of clinker we can use in a ton of cement, things like that. No? And renewables actually help us for the combustion piece, for the electricity that we need in other grinding mills, in transportation, whatever. No, in that front, I think the industry, and at least in the case of Cemex, we are making a lot of efforts in trying to make our operations as responsible as possible. For example, we have countries in which 100% of our electricity needs are renewable, for like the UK, Poland. All of our countries has at least 30% renewable electricity usage. No? In the vast majority of our kilns, we do alternative fuels, which is basically waste. We use waste as fuel. And in some cases, some of our kilns, like in Poland, in the UK as well, some of those, in Germany, some of those kilns use 90% of our fuel needs are waste. RDF, climate fuel, or you name it, whatever you like it. No? Our target is that by 2030, the latest, we reach the limits of what we can do with renewables, alternative fuels, and so on. And after that, the job will be trying to solve the process emissions, which will be a much more an effort of carbon capture, storage, and usage. No? But what we can do on that 40%, we believe that in the next 8 years, the latest, what we can do, it will be done.
And what's your, I mean, I know it's always hard to pinpoint a number with this kind of thing, but out of that 40%, what's your current working assumption about how much of that can be solved by renewables and those alternative fuels?
I would say you can easily do 80-90% of the problem. The thing there is that because of the continuous operations or maintenance issues or cycles and so on, we will end up having to use fossil fuels at some point, no? To fire up the kiln, to because there wasn't any wind or the hydrogen machine break up, no? That those things happen, no? But in essence, in theory, you should be able to solve the whole enchilada, not at that 40%.
Okay, so we've talked about that kind of the wider view of why renewables are not just a straight fix. So let's have a look at, could you give us, maybe one or two specific examples of types of renewables that you are interested in and how you see those applying? So sort of instead of looking at it as the problem, what's the kind of direct opportunity with a couple of examples, do you think?
Well, certainly we're using wind on electricity. We try to become the off-taker, but in some cases we are promoters of certain wind farms to actually help us decarbonize, which later on we end up selling our participation because we are not electricity providers. No? We're users, but we try to help as much as we can. Solar as well is another interesting one, which we are doing a lot of interesting experiments on actually producing clinker with solar power only. Hydrogen, of course, is something that we're investigating. The hydrogen, different to, for example, the steel industry, hydrogen in cement is still very incipient. We are using hydrogen so far as combustion enhancer. We are starting to testing as fuel, really replacing fuel. We still don't know what will be the behavior of the cement kilns at increased levels of hydrogen. That's something that we will see. No? But certainly those are probably the 3-4 main areas in which we are doing more preparatory work. The use of alternative fuels, waste and so on, tires and so on, that's been happening in this industry for years and years. No?
Yeah, no, I remember talking with one of the cement associations who, while saying cement sector has a lot of work to do, was saying, but we have also been at the forefront of waste as energy.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I can guarantee you that the cement industry will become a focal point of circular economy in several ways. Today, vast majority of us are disposing 30 times more waste than the one we generate. So and that can be taken to the extreme in the future.
Okay, well, let me grab hold of, there was one particular early stage tech that I was interested in that you guys have made an investment in, SynHelion. So maybe let's take that as just a bit of an example of one of the projects you're trialing, but also an investment that you've gone through the process with. Tell us a bit about how you first encountered them. What was it that really made you think, okay, these guys?
Well, these guys came out of the ETH Zurich. We have a good relationship with ETH through our R&D department. And this was through them when this conversation started on using this technology to actually heat kilns. This technology was originally intended, and actually it's very well advanced in that use case. SynHelion is very well advanced in using solar power plus CO2 in creating synthetic fuels. And in the conversations with them, when we started seeing that they could reach very high temperatures with solar power, we said, well, this could be used in actually heating a cement kiln. And that's where the conversation started flowing. And okay, but we started with the R&D guys, setting up a collaboration agreement with them to actually explore the opportunity. we saw at the laboratory level that it was feasible. And that's when the conversation from the venture capital point of view started on, okay, well, if we have a 5 phases collaboration agreement and the first 2 phases were positive, well, let's think about investing in order for using SynHelion to have funds to actually start escalating the cement piece of the technology. And actually, we ended up doing a joint venture with them, which is not yet enacted, but eventually will be enacted to actually continue developing this technology for cement. So today, that technology is being tested in a real environment here in Spain. We have managed to produce already clinker with solar power. It was grams. We are setting up a thing to actually start producing a fair amount of kilos. And if that works, the next stage will be try to come up with an industrial installation in one of our plants in Spain to actually heat the kiln, produce clinker, capture CO2, and produce synthetic fuels with the second piece of the SynHelion technology.
So, I mean, I'm guessing that unlike some other routes for decarbonisation, I'm assuming that the challenge with solar is less about how it affects the end product, more about, is it to do with how much end product it could, that source of energy could generate, or what's the challenge that you need to prove in this next round?
There's still several challenges that we believe we can solve. One is, of course, you need a lot of space to actually capture a lot of sun. The second is from the chemical point of view, as long as the heat is there, we don't see any problem. In fact, we're thinking about using the same CO2 as the heating media, circulated through and they actually providing the heat for the chemical reaction will be the same CO2. So we don't see that many technical barriers there. It's actually making sure that I mean, if it has worked in an equipment which is my size, we need to make it work in an equipment which is the size of this building. No? That's the challenge. And
in terms of the kind of early sense of cost effectiveness,
that will be something to be also be proven in these stages. No, I mean it's going to be worth it. I mean, because especially space, you need space.
All right. Well, interesting to hear about that. Let's I guess kind of flip the question back to something you addressed at the beginning, which is what is the benefit of that corporate venture capital model to a company like SynHelion or to any of the investments that you've made? When you think about like Cemex Ventures stacked up against other investors in a competitive landscape, what is it that you think is the kind of the primary benefit other than money that you can bring to a company?
I think certainly is, I think the important part of having a unit like ours, a corporate venture unit, in between the conversation between startups and a corporation is that we facilitate that conversation. Technologies knock the doors of our plants every day. And for our plant people, for our technical people, it's easy to talk about technical matters, no? But really trying to put sense into, okay, why is this important, relevant, beyond the actual technicalities, how can we make this work? And really being the agent of fluidity between the corporation and the startup, that's where the corporate venture helps a lot. And actually trying to get the best relationship you can get. It's not just, okay, I'll send you the technology, you test it, you like it, okay, it's going to be $100,000 to install it. No, it goes beyond that. It's coordinated with the R&D, it's coordinating with the technical guys, it's having a more robust team for the startup to think about the implications of escalating this in the cement industry, for example, having a win-win collaboration agreement, which not only provides them money, but also provides them with commitments to actually test things or have a more technical discussion, which otherwise they wouldn't be having. No, so that wouldn't happen if they talk directly with an R&D or the technical guys, or they just knock the door one day of the planning group or the CFO. No, I mean it's trying to have that grease to actually make the engine run. And that's where the corporate venturing is very helpful for this process.
When you kind of look forward over the next 10 years or so, and the sort of plans, momentum that you have within the venture group, what's coming next for you? Are there certain types of technologies that you have a particular interest in, or types of collaborations? What do you see on the horizon for you?
I think there's still plenty of things for us to do, especially in renewables, in hydrogen, carbon capture, etc. All those technologies will suffer. I think we're seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of the evolution of those technologies. For example, carbon capture, you can do it today, and it's been there for quite some time, but it's not cheap. And in order to make this hydrogen, I think I participate as well with you in Decarb Connect in a conversation about hydrogen and the future of hydrogen. And part of the things was we need hydrogen to become economically viable. Otherwise, the story won't stack up. Well, there's still a lot of technological advancement for that to happen. Beyond the actual business concepts behind, the technologies will evolve a lot, and in the next 10 years, that evolution will happen. And for companies like us, we need to be continuously, in spite of the fact that we have great relationship with a few startups that are helping us with us, and we have high hopes about them, about the economic viability of them, and so on. We know that in 10 years, somebody else will come with something better, probably them will be the ones coming with the next generation, which will be better. So we need to be part of that process and promote that process to happen. Otherwise, by the time we really need to go into solving the core of the problem, we won't have what it takes.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks to one of the ongoing challenges, doesn't it? Which is that this is all about systemic decarbonisation. It's not just one plant in one town in whatever part of Spain or the UK.
Exactly.
Is it
today we jump of joy when we set up a project to start using 100,000 tons of CO2 to create synthetic fuels in this plant, and it's applauses. Well, we will have to repeat that 120 times. In 120 different locations, systematically.
Well, Gonzalo, thank you so much for talking to us today. I feel like having picked your brains in Houston and now made you join the podcast, I really am very grateful.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Many thanks for listening to the Decarb Connect podcast. We work with clients across the industrial sectors, specifically those who are tasked with decarbonising the most energy-intensive products and materials that we use every day. If you have an interest in learning more about either our members network, our reports, or our event series, do get in touch with us at decarbconnect.com. Or if you'd like to take part in the podcast, email me, alex@ac@decarbconnect.com. Thanks for listening.